You're listening to the I Love You Keep Going podcast with George Haas. For more information, please visit our website at www.mettagroup.org. That's www.mettagroup.org.
Recording in progress.
So welcome everybody. This is I Love You Keep Going. It is Thursday, April 16th, 2026 at 7:36 p.m. And I thought that I would talk about the spiritual boost of attachment repair. Uh, what's been holding you back from deeper practice might be a second topic. But I often say that I think that doing the attachment work is a preliminary practice that then supports turning toward a deeper meditation practice. That's because I think of deep meditation practice as a primary exploration. And what we're really doing in doing the attachment repair is opening up or creating an effective way of engaging in exploration. If you look at it from that attachment activation, canceling the exploration system, and the settling of the attachment system, activating the exploration system might be one way to look at it. Or Winnicott talks about the vigilance of the environment needing to settle in order for the space, the space of creative primary exploration opening up. And we're really talking about this very early conditioning that affects this. If the infant or the small child needs to be vigilant about the environment because their confidence in being able to receive care is limited, then that creative space never really opens up, that settled space where the caregivers protect the child, and in that space between the child and the caregiver, the creative exploration space opens up. This, of course, is something that's often not available to the child's understanding. They understand the vigilance because it's automatic. It's this very deep survival mechanism. And when they miss the early experiences and exploration, it's very hard to notice deficits. It's very hard to notice things that are absent and you haven't been able to experience. A child has this energy and this resilience toward autonomy. And if that doesn't happen, the orientation to the outside world is very different than that. Sadness can develop, or a despair, a shame can develop in place of autonomy. And we do need that autonomous experience or sense of ourselves as separate and capable, but also that the world will respond to us. In Buddhism, of course, we always talk about mindfulness of inside, mindfulness of outside, mindfulness of inside and outside. So that sense of who we are and that sense of who others are, and then the interaction between self and other. In attachment terms, of course, that's the working model of self and the working model of other people. Autonomy is not that separateness, that walled-in sense of me, separate from the world, in opposition to the world. Autonomy is this dance between your sense of self and the sense of your own agendas and your own interests, and a reliance on other people. And that movement from connection into exploration, into connection into exploration, is really what we're talking about. What that actually means is that you can be authentic in your expression to other people. And if you can be authentic and you have the capacity to receive other people's authenticity, then what you do is make relationships that are based on reality, right? Actual knowledge of each other. But if you are unwilling to tell other people who you are, then you are putting them in the position of being in a fantasy relationship to you, because they're relating to you in the way that you present yourself. And if that isn't an authentic expression, if it's an inauthentic expression, then they're not in relationship to you. They're in relationship to the inauthentic presentation that you give. And if they're not willing to tell you authentically who they are, then you're actually in a fantasy relationship with them and who they're presenting themselves to be. And then anytime there's evidence that you're not actually in a relationship with somebody, that you're in relationship to a fantasy, it's very jarring. It's very frightening. It causes a lot of anxiety, and that's the thing that triggers the vigilance. But and what we often don't notice, particularly if we grow up in environments where we've always had to be vigilant, we don't notice the absence of that space of creative play, you might say. Do you remember what it was like to play as a child, and how that worked out? Did you have a sense of your own imagination and the things that really interested and mattered to you, or did you join in a kind of collective play? You know, we have on top of all of that, of course, the cultural layer, what it is that's valued in culture. In the society that I grew up in, it was a baseball in the spring and football, American football, in the fall as the two big games, and the highest social value were people who could play that. In the meantime, on the playground, at a certain point, tetherball arrived. Do you remember tetherball? Is it still something that people play? And that actually gave you a lot of points. But if you didn't have those interests, everything else was less valuable. Did you have caregivers that were interested in what mattered to you, interested in what you were good at, and did they support and encourage you to develop those capacities? And did they value it so that you were free to play, to explore? Why is this, Mudit?
Phil, hi George.
Hi, nice to see you.
Likewise. For me, the mystery that the person is born as a tabula rasa, and then there is nothing that he's good at. And the only thing that he's good at is the thing that he's exposed to. And a rhetorical question, but just something that just comes to my mind again and again, that if there's no such thing as not conditioned, like not practiced, not conditioned.
Well, let's say there are three main body types, right? Mesomorphic, ectomorphic, and endomorphic, right? The classic model of beauty in Western culture, going back to the Greeks, is the mesomorph, right? Narrow hips, wide shoulders, very low fat content in the skin, so that you can see the musculature. The musculature is sort of at a medium level in a mesomorph, and there's a natural capacity for that body. An endomorph is, a lot of fat content in the skin, big muscles, heavy frame. Ectomorphs, low musculature, heavy skin, much less physical capacity, but they tend to be smarter than mesomorphs or endomorphs, and that's the compensation, at least in our culture. If I asked you the question, would you rather be smart or beautiful, what would your answer be?
Not answering that.
um, and then did you know in France, in the post office, they have a bust of a woman that they change every 10 years, which is supposed to represent the beauty aesthetic of that era. And it's in every post office, which I think is uh, 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 it's very funny and also delightful. This is French, right? The weight of that cultural determination. What's your hand-eye coordination? That sort of is part of the body that you have, the presence or absence of it. So that yes, you then have to have a sensitive caregiver who understands what all of that basis is, and what matters to you, and what's interesting to you, in the way that your conditioning develops over time. Is that making sense? What gives you
The
pleasure?
debate is that nothing matters to you initially. The only thing they're exposed to, I mean, that's just a
Well, I think some things matter, like your interest in, for instance, a newborn baby, if it's plopped on the belly of the mother, will crawl up to the breast in search of food just instinctively. There are those aspects. Some bodies have genetic predispositions for this or that.
that could be the case. Yeah.
And then, we family systems survive, the genetics of the family system survive, and you're born into a family with the genetics of that family system. So you're easily adaptable into that family system in that sense.
So there's one more question.
Yeah.
Now that you brought this topic of beauty, it's such a persistent thing in my life, that I do make choices which are conditioned, right? I do make certain choices on the person or the woman that I'm attracted to based on my conditioned definition of beauty.
Right.
You see, there is no way to know what's a clear distinction of like this attraction is of beauty that it's coming from me towards another person is conditioned versus is authentic. I always know what kind of woman that I'll be attracted to.
So the conflict is not between understanding what's arousing, what is also of interest relationally, right? So different aspects. And then also the aspect of is that person as an object valuable or not valuable in the culture that you're in, right? It is possible to find an erotic charge for people that are not considered uh, culturally valuable. How big of a conflict is that? So that is the conflict so great that you would forego a level of eroticism or a level of relational interest in a person because they didn't have the societal value that you were also interested in.
You mean the status, right? Yeah, I do that, yes. There's this aspect of status that I get from selecting somebody who's matches my definition of beauty.
So that, but if there's no conflict there, if the eroticism and the relational aspect of the relationship also is coupled with somebody who has high social status, then there's not an absence particularly there. But if you're foregoing relational connection and eroticism so that the person that you pick is of more interest societally, then there's going to be a deficit in the relationship that is based on those choices, right? Or can you go, I think probably ideally you would pick somebody who relationally matches and that you feel seen and known by them and supported by them so that they support your primary exploration, that the eroticism is there, and then um, cope with whatever their status is in the wider culture, beauty wise. One of the things in particular about beauty is it really is in younger people, because we don't think old people are beautiful. In fact, there's like a wall or a ceiling of age that happens. And once you get past 50, the joke is that you can't get anybody to take your order in Starbucks because you become invisible. You're standing there waiting for the barista to recognize you, and they can't see you because you've gotten too old. You disappear from relevance. This is particularly torturous for people who have had a lot of play on the side of beauty, and then all of a sudden, just in the natural process of being live, comes and goes. All things being impermanent. And then are you lucky in the way that your eroticism survived, that it actually is oriented toward people who are considered generally attractive? Because it doesn't necessarily have to be. Is that making sense?
Yeah, thanks to Botox.
Yes, indeed. And all the rest, so that you can be 32 from the chin up and 89 from the chin down. Why do we talk about exploration and repairing attachment in relationship to deep meditation practice? And the main reason I do that is because deep meditation practice is a primary exploration, and it takes a lot of capacity to really understand deeply what it is that is described in the poetry of the sages, from the past, and then also to be willing to pursue it in a way, or to even have the insight, and that if you don't have much capacity to explore, it's inhibited because of the early attachment conditioning that is going to either delay or prevent or inhibit the capacity to explore deeply in that path. And we don't tend to do a lot of preliminary practices in the West. I think part of it is that we're so affluent in the West that we think that we don't have to do preliminary stuff. We can just skip to the advanced stuff. When I went over to Myanmar to look for a retreat center to bring Mettagroup people to, I was assigned to a monk that had been in the monastery for 7 years. And the deal was that I would talk to him in English, and he would practice his English with me, and then he would explain to me the setup of the monastery. And it was a large, 700 acres was the size of the monastery. There was a wall down the middle of it that divided the men's side from the women's side. And in the men's side, that you couldn't use a chair, so that if you needed to sit in a chair, if you were a man, you had to sit on the woman's side of the monastery, which I thought was fascinating. So all of the old people, regardless of sex, sat on the women's side, and only the people that were capable of sitting without a chair who were male sat on the men's side. But he explained to me that he had been doing breath counting for 5 years, only breath counting, and that his teachers were not satisfied with the depth of his and stability of his jhana practice that was using breath as the object, so that they hadn't given him the instructions for insight practice yet. And I was thinking that in the West, on my first meditation retreat, I was given instructions for Vipassana with really not much capacity to do anything, really. And I thought that that was quite interesting in the way that we relate to it. And he was quite content at 5 years into his practice of developing stability in his concentration. I also think that if you go deeply into the Vipassana side of things, that it is possible to uncover material that you have kept from consciousness, kept from the self-experience. And how do you balance that? Particularly if you don't do a lot of preliminaries, right? What happens when you get into areas that you don't have much capacity to hold? What's the solution? And the main solution in the West is to temporarily stop practicing until it cools off and then go back in. It's one of the reasons I like to teach a metta-vipassana practice, so that you have a refuge in the development of positivity and the development of metta jhana, so that you have the capacity to develop high concentration states. You focused on an object, in this case, a mind state. That's extremely important in understanding the nature of attachment conditioning and attachment responses to the environment, because it often presents as a mind state, a shift in mind state. Can you understand the difference between the activation of a attachment-oriented mind state, which would be compelling you to seek proximity to somebody who will protect you and somebody who will emotionally regulate you, and when that settles, that vigilance settles, and the mind state of exploration opens up, that sense of safety, that sense of security, and then that vast space of creative play opening up. And what happens if you didn't have those experiences in early childhood? You know, you're insecurely attached, or you're disorganized in your attachment system, and so that ready access to that space of creative play has never really been something that you've had available to you. One of the things about the vigilance, of course, is it shuts that down, and then you have to slog through trying to discover something, to explore, mainly in what's left of the cognitive function. And that whole part of the brain, that whole part of the capacity to explore, is unavailable to you. So in the process of repairing your attachment, and if we consider it as a preliminary practice, you begin to examine, what is the attachment mind state? What is the exploration mind state? How do you regulate the activation of the attachment system so that space opens? How do you engage in collaborative play if you've not known collaboration particularly? So learning the skills of collaborative play then opens up the possibility that you can engage in a relationship with a meditation teacher. You can collaborate with the meditation teacher in understanding how it is that you need to practice, so that you can further the insights that you have, or the insights that you need to have in order to discover this pathway to enlightenment. That all making sense? So then what is that we need to do in order to shift our attachment conditioning. It's very stable, attachment conditioning. Mary Main used to say that you have a 70% chance of having the same attachment strategy as your great-grandmother, 4 generations stable. You have an 85% chance of inheriting the attachment strategy of your primary caregiver. I was reading Morris Eagle, and he was suggesting that actually attachment theory, if it was actually true and complete, that it would be 100%. And so that we have to have these accommodations for the veracity of attachment theory, because there's these gaps, 30% over 4 generations or 15%. But to me, those numbers are astonishingly high. So let me begin to look what happens. We know what the child's experience is that leads to an avoidance strategy. This is primarily neglect, sometimes with rejection, sometimes with involving in the caregiver involving the child in the mind state. Preoccupation comes from the involving into the mind state of the caregiver. That's the vigilance, right? That involving in the mind state of someone else creates a vigilance. In the avoidance strategy, the space opens, the creative space opens, but the organization is not around what it is that's of primary interest. What opens instead is a dedication to more secondary exploration. So primary exploration is the pursuit of things that really provide meaning for you in your life. And everybody's conditioning is different. Everybody's conditioning is unique. So the thing that matters, the process of exploration, is uniquely yours. One of the things that makes it so interesting, if you were to authentically share it with someone else, is that the uniqueness of your perspective, the uniqueness of what you find interesting, and that expression of it, right? How did you discover the things that matter to you? That process of discovery is also of interest because it can inform someone else on how they might explore something that mattered to them. And in that exchange back and forth, they go out and discover something, and then they tell you what they discovered, which is of interest, but then also how they discovered it, which can be instructive in how to do it, how to find out what you need to know. When you enter into a meditation community, for instance, it's when it isn't, say, a competition of states, which I find fascinating. These competitive conversations around states attained without much in the way of the offering of insight into how you might do that, as opposed to a collaborative exchange where the discoveries and how the discoveries happened are of such interest. We did.
George, I remember this game we played in the in-person event where you had us a dyad where we used to repeat numbers.
Right.
Sorry, was there a thing where a secure person would make it easier for the other person to follow?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's interesting because, the idea is to collaborate so that you're saying the numbers simultaneously. That was the goal of it. But what often happened is people would report that actually they were competitive. And so they made it more difficult for the person to respond in such a way that there would be simultaneity. That means that you forego the goal. You forego achieving the goal yourself in order to maintain that kind of competition.
I thought disorganized people would do that also.
Um,
This kind.
yeah, I don't know that I would necessarily tag it to one particular attachment strategy. Uh, it it is, but it's definitely outside of the range of collaboration. People who don't understand collaboration, who aren't able to do it very well, might naturally fall into a kind of competition. Or, another thing that often comes up in that play is not following the rules. So, the structure is to count from 1 to 20. And so they would say a number that's outside of the range of those numbers because the confining themselves to playing with the rules is unbearable. Right? Preoccupied people often grow up, and because they're role reversed and enmeshed in the mind state of the caregiver, and they're taking care of the caregiver who is an adult, often the caregiver allows them behaviors that are outside of what normally a child would be expected to do. And in the process of that, there's always some forgiving of the rules. And so the child learns that they're exempt from the rules, and then that carries out over into their adult life where they chafe at having to follow the rules. Or, say a disorganized person, their sense of justice is so violated in childhood, they don't feel that the rules actually matter. Certainly not. For many disorganized people, the rules didn't matter, and so they don't actually value the rules in that same way. So that when you bring a game like that, where there's this particular goal that's collaborative and a set of rules, they can't do it. But what that also means is that they don't achieve the goal. We were filming that particular exercise, which is that one person says a number between 1 and 20, and the other person attempts to say that number as fast as possible so that it appears that you're saying them simultaneously. It was a husband and wife. They'd been married for probably 40 years, and he started calling out numbers, and she matched each one almost immediately. And it was completely simultaneous and completely in sync for the whole time. And then when they reversed it, he never got close to calling the number. And it was very clear in that she was doing all of the emotional work, all of the attention in the relationship, and he wasn't actually reciprocating it anyway. Very typical avoidant, preoccupied dynamic in relationship.
So I thought that he is, I thought this is the secure sorry, not to put an attachment on the style, but he is making it easier for her to follow.
Well, that is to say, he's simply presenting himself without regard to her, and she's used to following him.
Oh, I see. He's not going towards the collaboration easiness, but he's just going for whatever he is.
Right.
And then the wife knows him so well.
And is used to paying attention to him and regulating and is enmeshed with him. So she's very tuned.
It's interesting that this will come out in numbers. It's very interesting.
But really, it's a ruse in the sense that the goal of that is to see whether or not you're regulated by the other person and to really demonstrate that it isn't the talk that is regulating. It's simply the body's interacting automatically, autonomically, that is regulating. That making sense? So then you find you feel better, you feel the same, or you feel worse. That's always the basis. And every now and then, it's Um, it's more often that you feel better, you feel the same. It's less often that you feel worse. But when you do feel worse, it's aggravating to have spent the time doing the counting. Christian.
George, you wouldn't see, like, to me, that sort of preoccupied, like, maybe hypermentalizing would be the bad side of it, but being so attuned, I can't think of the con of that, only that the preoccupied person is staying in relation with the person that refuses to do the same for them, or do like even a semblance of that for them? Or do you actually see that there's a drawback to the actual skill that the preoccupied person has of really reading into or kind of giving that attention?
Well, the main dilemma is the lack of then attention for themselves. So that when you look at that mentalizing frame, they're very spontaneous, but they don't monitor. They're very other oriented, but not self oriented. They're very externally oriented, but not internally oriented. And they're very affectively oriented, but not cognitively oriented. So they're very good at enmeshing and emotionally regulating the emotional experience of the other person, and it causes them to flip into the empathetic experience of the other person being the dominant emotional experience, and their own emotional experience moving into the secondary position, so that when they're proximate to and have successfully regulated the other person, they feel regulated. But if there's a separation from the other person, they feel dysregulated or disconnected. And all of that inhibits their capacity to explore, which is the main downside of it.
Okay.
So,
I guess just in the half of that number game, there isn't really, for the person that's trying to repeat the number, there isn't really a self-monitoring component in that I'm picking up, but it does come up on the other half where they
right.
are saying the number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's representative of the orientation toward the capacity to explore. Mainly, I think that's the main drawback, is that the consequences of it are that you can't really separate to explore.
Right. I guess my hidden premise is that there's some skill that a preoccupied person has that not even maybe a secure person has. But if you attain security from a preoccupied stance, then maybe you have a certain advantage as long as you don't find yourself getting pulled into the other completely and out of yourself. But you might have a kind of an advantage in reading in kind of reading other people.
What I think we hope for is that you balance the skills, so that in some sense, in moving towards security, there would be a limiting of that capacity to enmesh by the monitoring aspect of it. The developing of a monitoring aspect, the development of a sense of self, a development of the sense of your own interiority, development of a cognitive sense. So that heightened aspect that the preoccupied person has hopefully would be rebalanced, and actually not as available as it is in the preoccupied mind state.
Wouldn't there also be something about when you're preoccupied, just because you're noticing, you're not necessarily accurate?
Yeah, no, it's
And that's where
teleological.
I think that's for Christian, I think that's exactly where that balancing comes from, because implied versus explicit,
Right.
and I'll leave it at that.
That's the problem with teleological and psychic equivalence and pretend mode all conflating into one ball of relationship, right? you think that you know what's happening. You think that you're empathetic, but actually it's a kind of pseudo empathy. And you don't validate your perception particularly. It's always, this is what the secure stance is. This is what I think is going on. What do you think is going on? This is how I'm experiencing it. How are you experiencing it? And it's explicit, so that you're actually in a reality-based relationship. And in this coupling, there is a recording of that couple doing the diet, but I don't have it. One of the things about watching the recording is you're never actually in sync. It's always evident that there isn't that synchronicity when it's recorded, because the perception of simultaneity and simultaneity are not the same thing, right? Your perception of the present moment is actually running a half a second behind. So you could call out the number, the person could receive the number and say the number, and as long as it happened fast enough, that is to say, as long as it happened within a half a second, you'd both perceive it as happening at the same time, even though there was a delay in it. That makes sense? No? Your self-experience of the present moment is actually running a half a second behind the present moment, and you just smooth over the delay, so you don't notice it. But you're hearing me say words, they're probably even delayed because they're going through Zoom. And then you're watching the picture of me, and it sounds like and appears like that it's happening, and then you're responding in a reasonable pace of time, even though there's a built-in delay for that. And when you repeat the numbers fast enough, you can slip the response can slip within that half a second, and then it appears as if it's happening at the same time when it really isn't. Makes sense. It takes 3/8. The perception is very fast. The processing is not as fast.
So then when people watch the dyads back, are they like really surprised by how different it is watching than how it felt doing it?
They are often reporting that. It seemed like we were right together, but you can see the delay in the video. Would it?
Oh, I was gonna think because the hearing is still happening after the sound reaches technically it should be the same thing, because it's not that when you speak from LA, I receive it.
Right.
It's only when the sound leaves the speakers on my computer
That you hear it.
that I hear it.
But well, at least before COVID, we used to do the dyads in person. So anyway. If you can repair your attachment conditioning such that the vigilance reliably goes away, that is to say, you can reliably relax the vigilance because you've developed a social network that supports you, so you don't require it the whole time, then what opens up is this space of creative play, which is really held between you and the people that you regard as reliable and safe. And then you can dive into that exploration, which then allows you, in terms of meditation practice, to go deep without the anxiety shutting it down, the fearfulness shutting it down. If you form within a meditation community a dialogue, a collaborative dialogue with other people who are practicing, you can express the discoveries that you're making and the experiences that you're having with someone else, not in a competitive way, but in a collaborative way, and understand the pathways that they go down and what they discover, and they can understand in the pathways that you go down and what you discover a way of practicing into these states of liberation. Makes sense? What do you say we do some practice? What would you like to do? IPF, is that what that one is? What do you think? Metta. Christian, what do you think? Loving kindness. All right, let's do that. So go ahead and settle in, closing your eyes, scanning through the body, looking for any tension you might be holding, seeing if you can release it. Okay, let go of the meditation. How's that? Would it?
I have this thing, just after a few minutes of the practice is a saturation, a boredom. There are no negative states, but it's the sense of, some sense of arrival at some point. It feels like arrived, and that's where the world of thoughts and pleasant, blissful sleepiness arrives. It's very common. After 3 minutes of great practice.
What about doing it as a walking practice?
That's exactly what I was doing right now.
Good.
Because the sense of self is slightly more. But then that was also okay because I'm by myself. So I started imagining situations which were unpleasant.
And what about the view?
That was the other thing I changed. Usually the instructions on like feeling it in the sensations in the head were, I don't think I tried something, I was always focusing on my head, so it was very personal. But now I focus on the air in the left, the surrounding air on the left and the right.
Because when you're doing walking practice, the eyes are typically open and it's expansive for all sentient beings.
Including sitting ones. I realize it's better to open up the air on the left and right.
Yeah.
Because the world otherwise didn't change for me. But now that you were saying something that if I opened, the world itself is literally the air, that the objects do change. Yes, it's like a very subtle.
The appearance of them, yeah.
And then the last thing I did was to move the practice, once I had the sleepiness or the thoughts coming back in because I'm bored with the practice, is exactly when I make the view more and more subtle.
Yep.
But it's still there. I mean, I still get bored. I still feel a little sleepy. It's a very strong, neutral piece. But it's not like positive in that sense.
Right. Yeah, we definitely want to incline it toward the positive. The neutral side is going toward the equanimity side, which we don't want.
Maybe the word peaceful is just so equanimous for me. Maybe I need to change the word.
Okay. Yeah, it needs to resonate, the phrase. Good.
Healthy is my word. Thank you.
All right, so let's see. We have a level 2 coming up. It's starting on May 6th, which will be on Wednesday mornings from 10:30 to 12:30. We have some level ones coming up. I am wanting to change the time of this class to Thursdays at noon. How does that sound? Noon to 1:30, I think, is what we're thinking. Good? All right. So that should happen soon. We'll announce it, and then and that's what we'll do. Good to see you.
George, real
Appreciate
quick,
your practice. Uh-huh.
can I, just right after, can I ask just some masterclass business real quick?
Sure. Thank you. Bye. Good night. What's up?
I don't know if this needs to be on the recording, but
Oh, good idea. Let's not.
I was just wondering, I'm still not on the facilitator directory.
Really?
Oh, sorry, you haven't stopped.